Anyway, here, we're blasting off. We're blasting off. Let the people know. The community note is wild. Yeah, I saw. John Fetterman is so stupid because, I mean, he must have some kind of brain deficiency if he thinks that, like, people are not going to remember how John Fetterman has presented himself as a progressive throughout his entire career. He's doing like a Kirsten Sinema ass turn here. What the
I'm John Fetterman, and I'm a Democrat, and I'm a progressive.
It's like, wow, man, he's at Netroots. Like, what the is he doing at Netroots? He's not a progressive. I'm not a progressive. I'm just a regular Democrat, says John Fetterman.
Overwhelmingly the favorite to win what could be the Democrat.
Okay. I'm just a Democrat running on what I've always believed plus know to be true. John Fetterman, I'm not a progressive. I'm just a regular Democrat. Here's the community notes absolutely hammering his asshole. There are multiple instances of John Fetterman's social media of him claiming to be a progressive. I know people that work for him. It's like kind of wild that he's making this heel turn, and it's really awkward. He has like, outside of his like chief of staff, who is, I don't really know that well. There are plenty of people that I know that works for him on his comms team, and these are guys who are like union guys who've like worked with Bernie Sanders' campaign and many other people's campaigns. Like, these are motherfuckers that are like actually leftist people. It's so wild. It's so wild that he's trying to like retcon his image now to make like this weird heel turn to act like he's not a progressive guy, but instead he's just like a regular boring ass Kirsten Sinema style Democrat, which is weird. I guess not a Kirsten Sinema style Democrat, but still, like, what does it really matter though? So he has one shitty take about 99% good takes. So you want to condemn him on that one shitty take? Seems like missing the forest for the trees. First of all, dumbass, that one take has also basically built on top of a bunch of other takes. Here, I'll give you a great example. John Fetterman recently said he's actually, just kidding, he's anti-immigration. Bro, his wife is a immigrant. His wife is Brazilian. The are you talking about? He's literally ran on being pro-immigration from the jump. And now he's acting like it's not just a one take that happens to be pro-genocide, okay? It's literally, it doesn't just end there. Because of his pro-genocide stance on Israel, which is unceremonious and ridiculous, and he doesn't have to go this hard to begin with. It's not like an apt political calculation for him. Now, on top of that, here's how it's piling on. Here's how it's actually turning into a larger problem, okay? In order to push forward a spending package, an emergency spending package for Israel and also for Ukraine, he has to now capitulate to the Republican Party on an insanely reactionary, insanely white nativist immigration package as well, which unironically goes against immigration. Now we're doing right-wing style immigration reforms, immigration restrictions, rather. So what happened? I thought it was just one take. It's so weird. It's so weird that it doesn't just like end and begin with this one take, which is, oh yeah, I just love the genocide Israel's conducting with our taxpayer dollars, which, by the way, ironically, doesn't even poll well. It is unpopular, okay? The majority want a ceasefire. I don't even give a shit what the majority wants, though. I give a shit about the actual morality of the situation. I am a leftist after all, a progressive. And real progressives aren't just simply making arguments about what is politically favorable. Real progressives, unironically, assume positions, take positions, and advocate for positions that might not necessarily be all that popular, because we don't push for things just because it's going to be popular. We push for things because it's right, okay? We know that things will inevitably be popular if you can message around it correctly, which the Democratic Party rarely ever does. I think this is a fundamental principle that many people, many young progressives have forgotten about, right? I think that maybe they took the supposed popularity of progressive values under the Trump administration because Democrats were negatively polarized against Donald Trump for granted. I think a lot of people took that for granted. I think a lot of people took the Bernie popularity for granted and started saying like, oh no, it's not just that like we're progressive, our policies are also popular. Sure, some of our policies are genuinely popular, especially on the ballot. But without actual messaging beyond it, obviously some of them are going to be objective failures in the electoral sense. So what you have to do is advocate for these positions, not from the perspective of popularity, but also beyond that, from the perspective of morality. This is what I talked about with, this is what I talked to David Dane about earlier today, okay? Like, Democrats have not been messaging on immigration at all. I think the squad and their hubris are also not seeking advice from old head leftists who fought these battles before. I think people just like, I think people legitimately think that like certain things, certain principles are just going to be popular without even actual messaging being put behind it. And that's not the case. Okay? That's not how this works at all. You have to push. You have to literally consistently cut messaging. Republicans never stop doing that. Okay? Republicans never stop messaging, even when it's a failure, because they think that this is a long-term plan. Look at the transphobia. Look at the transphobia. Republicans recognize that the transphobia stuff is not enough. There isn't enough people motivated. There isn't enough people brain broken at this very moment to see transphobic policies as like a single issue vote, right? But in their endless desperation to find a new way to activate the white evangelical Protestant base, they still consistently try to create enough of an audience for that transphobia. That's why they message so aggressively. That's why they're also pushing for policies on top of that to like normalize transphobia, to make transphobia and anti-queer messaging a moral panic that is valid, that is successful. Okay? And the reality is, the reality is like no one, right now it doesn't work, but it might work in the future because the Republicans never stop. They keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing until it is a position that genuinely has a constituency behind it. Democrats, on the other hand, refuse to do this for good things. Things that are much easier to make popular, like immigrants are the backbone of American society. And not that long ago, did the Republican Party legitimately have a different perspective on immigration? Yes, they always had the white nativist immigration sentiments within their messaging, but there was a very real heel turn occurring in the Republican Party in the Mitt Romney era, where they were looking at immigration and going, maybe we need to do some comprehensive immigration reform, which Donald Trump completely destroyed, of course, because Donald Trump showed the Republican Party, no, actually, you can be as reactionary as you want on immigration, and Americans will actually push for it because the Democratic Party is never going to counter a message around that. Do you understand what I'm trying to say here? Democrats do not put forward counter messaging. Democrats do not tell you why immigration is good. They just sit there and allow Republicans to dominate the conversation. And then when they dominate the conversation and the population attitude towards immigration sours, right, in spite of the actual facts of the matter, and same goes for policing as well, Cinemarxism. While I disagree with you on a lot of the stuff that you say, you are absolutely correct on this. Same with policing. Democrats literally counter message against the Democratic base of support on policing. And then what happens? All that ends up happening is you ratchet towards a right-wing position. Democrats love making the Republican faulty premise the reality for some weird reason. Well, the weird reason is that they also, benefit from it, which is why Ryan Grimm here is saying, I think the Democrats want to be pushed in the direction of more reactionary immigration policy because they don't want to change the attitude for people. They don't. They are beholden to the same corporate benefactors. That's it. Reminds me of the left in Israel, which died hard for the things similar to what you're saying. Yeah. The Labor Party's death in Israel is damn near identical to what I'm describing with the Democratic Party. The only difference is the Democratic Party, in America, we have a two-party system. We don't have a Knesset, right? We don't have a parliamentary structure. So, like, you don't see a fall off in the same way as, like, the Labor Party did. But it was neoliberalism. Volodymyr Zelensky is absolutely correct. Labor Party fall off, like, in the late 90s is damn near identical to the same neoliberalism that eviscerated every other country as well. And the byproduct of this is a completely gutted social programs, a more reactionary base, and a ratcheting effect towards more and more fascist policies. Okay? It is genuinely so depressing and so devastating to watch this play out in front of my eyes year over year over year as I scream into the void, it seems, where I keep saying, Democrats, message more. Start pushing the idea that, like, immigrants are the backbone of American society because it's the truth. Start pushing the idea that immigrants aren't actually stealing our robust welfare safety nets because we don't even have robust welfare safety nets to begin with. The notion that, like, immigrants are actually predisposed genetically to doing more crime is a reactionary, fascist, psychopathic lie. There isn't even evidence. There's only evidence to disprove that narrative. And yet when you ask every average American, centrist, Democrat, right-wing, fascist, doesn't matter, from all different walks of life, if you ask them about immigrants doing crime, they literally think a falsehood. They think this falsehood is correct. Why? Because the only domineering narrative is coming from the Republican side. It's coming from Fox News. And of course, if the only one talking about immigration is talking about immigration in a negative way, despite the fact that, like, the facts on the ground show the exact opposite of what the Republicans are saying, then yeah, people are going to be more bigoted. And the more bigoted they become, the more right-wing this position is going to be. And the more right-wing the immigration position, immigration sentiment becomes, the more the Democratic Party normalize that. And because they're terrified. They're terrified of losing elections, but they love losing elections in reality. So they're genuinely refusing to communicate the truth, okay? That immigrants are not predisposed to crime. They actually do crimes at a much lower rate per capita than natural-born U.S. citizens or even naturalized U.S. citizens, okay? And that immigrants are the unironic backbone of American agricultural production and American society in general, American labor in general. And the correct thing to do in this circumstance is not to shut off immigration or make Title 42 permanent, a provision that the Republicans could only pass due to a global pandemic, right? A health provision, because immigrants are coming in and they might have COVID and they might give people COVID. That was the reason why the Trump administration was able to utilize the CDC to shut off immigration in its entirety, okay? Asylum seekers and whatnot. And what did the Democratic Party do? What is the Democratic Party doing right now? They are capitulating to the demands to make Title 42 permanent. So what difference does the Joe Biden administration have on this issue than the Trump administration? As a matter of fact, they are the ones who ended up literally turning around and making a Trump administration era provision that is supposed to be temporary due to a pandemic permanent. This is the exact same thing that Joe Biden had done when he was the vice president. Sidestepping Harry Reid to take tax cuts that were slated to sunset under the Obama administration, and he literally went in and sidestepped Harry Reid, which, by the way, Ironically, Ryan Grimm perfectly details and documents in his earlier book, not The Squad, the other one. What was it? Yes, we got power. I think it was great book. And we got people, not we got power. Anyway, Democrats never roll back the right-wing provisions that the Republicans put forward. As a matter of fact, they turn them permanent. They make them permanent. What is this?
At work here is like,
oh no, I don't care to watch this again. Okay.
You also, though, have some real clear breaks when it comes to certain members of the Democratic Party, both on Israel and immigration as well. John Fetterman being one of them, showing kind of more of an independent streak. This is from NBC News saying, "I'm not a progressive," John Fetterman says. He's breaking with progressives on hot-button issues with his fiery support for Israel and calling for Democrats to engage on tougher immigration laws, disappointing some on the left as he shows an independent streak. Talk more about this.
He also voted just last week to extend spying authorities as well. I think there has been so much kind of outrage at Fetterman's kind of over-the-top, unconditional support of everything that Israel has done. He was asked, is Israel committing any war crime? He's like, absolutely not. Not even the question of, well, maybe there have been some that have been alleged. They should be investigated. Like nothing even approaching some sort of accountability or putting some sort of conditions on support for Israel. And so I feel like the criticism is kind of being received, and he's digging in, and now he's finding other ways that he's going to kind of get in little online fights with the left. At the same time, the polling on the border in particular and the questions around immigration are clear that he's moving toward the easier position there.
Let's talk to the Squad while I have you, and the book that you wrote on them. You write this: members of the Squad and its allies made history speaking up against Israel's war on Gaza. Then came the backlash. Walk us through that.
Yeah, The Guardian, in a review of the book, said it maybe should have been called The Squad and Its Enemies, or The Squad and Its Adversaries, which I think is actually fair. Just as the Squad rose and enacted what Bernie Sanders calls this kind of political revolution in 2018, early 2019, the counter-revolution rose with it. This organization, Democratic Majority for Israel, was kind of spun off by AIPAC advisors the same time that the Squad was sworn in 2019. And then, as you said, when they really stood up on the floor in May of 2021 and created space for significant criticism of Israel, because it wasn't just them. Now there were more than a dozen members who came to the floor and were lambasting Israel for the bombing of Gaza back in May of 2021. That's when AIPAC decided, okay, we need to get fully into the game ourselves, not just with this Democratic Majority for Israel. And they spent more than $30 million that cycle purging critics of the party during primaries, and they're looking at possibly spending $100 million in this next cycle.
What do you see as the ultimate objective of the Squad?
Fetterman is from Pittsburgh, where there was a mass synagogue killing. Perhaps it's more personal for him. Yeah, except that's not about Israel. You understand that, right? Like, that person who literally went into the synagogue was a Trump supporter who became even more radical than Trump and literally went in and detailed exactly why he was trying to kill Jews. He was trying to kill Jewish people because he believed that Jews were actually doing unrestricted immigration that was tarnishing the pure white gene pool in America. So John Fetterman literally turning around, okay, and advocating for more strict immigration is more in line with that guy who did the synagogue shooting. Nothing here has anything to do with Israel. That guy didn't go in there and was like, literally was like, oh yeah, I'm doing this because like America is giving money to Israel. Like, that's ridiculous. He was a Nazi. Also, Israel does not represent Judaism. Attacking a synagogue because you think you are freeing Palestine is an act of anti-Semitism. Okay? Something that I'm very clear on in general. So remember that. I'm not on you for the record. I'm just saying that that is not the case. I know you are looking for any reason to try to make sense of this, but I think it's simply, and I do agree with Edinger Mentum on this a little bit, I think it's simply that John Fetterman's whole shtick is that he just digs his heels in and then will just be like, oh, okay, I'm trolling you. I don't give a f. Like, this is my point. Lol. And, like, everybody liked it when he was doing it for progressive policies, right? But it's not funny or cool or makes sense at all when you're doing it for an ongoing genocide that you are unconditionally and vociferously supporting. So that's the difference here. But the attitude from Fetterman is still the same. He's a big baby back bitch, okay? Did he ever really do any progressive policies? Yeah, of course. He was always a defender of a lot of progressive shit, whether it be legalization of marijuana. He was a lieutenant governor of Pennsylvania, and he was an advocate for legalizing marijuana and other things as well. Like, it's just he was a pro-immigration. Talked about how he did a bunch of shit. By the way, this part is also the beginning of the end, okay? That he went in and let the pro-Israel lobby edit his Israel-Palestine position in exchange for not nuking him with a super PAC. And then beyond that, he has become this demon. I think he sees that being a conservative Democrat, especially because, like, Pennsylvania is seen as, like, purple in some ways, especially the areas that he's supposed to represent. Okay? Anyway. Is it a shame the Hogs were right about him getting a head transplant? Yeah. Why do this? Does he think he'll be more popular? Is it all about? I think it's I think it's he's just kind of an annoying asshole, right? And when he gets his mind on a certain thing, he just, like, kind of stands. I mean, he just thinks it's good to basically push for whatever the policy is now that he's made up his mind. But beyond that, I think it's a careerist opportunity. The Democratic Party's senatorial lineup is filled to the brim with motherfuckers who are just like John Fetterman, right? Oh, I'm a senator in a kind of red area, in a kind of red state, or a state that could be leaning red, so I'm just going to be a ginormous piece of shit and over my own constituents. Joe Manchin is another example of this. And I think that that's what John Fetterman is positioning himself towards as well. Like, he will be progressive on certain things, probably, or maybe not at all. Fetterman's take on Israel is disappointing. I don't think we'd have gotten anything better from Mehmet Oz, though. We'll have to primary him next time. It just sucks. It sucks because, like, I know what that feels like. I know how quickly that shift happened. And I know it sucks when you, like, advocate for a person. And as did I, by the way, defended him, advocated for him. And a lot of people here might have even literally worked on his campaign. And then all of a sudden, and I know people that directly work on his campaign, right? These are progressive people. It just sucks to see someone like that go from perhaps maybe being one of the better contenders for a new left in America, right, to this giant asshole who loves, just, like, loves being contrarian and is making light of a ongoing genocide. Anyway, I wanted to briefly cover that for you to understand the situation with John Fetterman. But I also need you to understand another thing. Pro-Palestine has never been a popular position in this goddamn country. Okay? This is the most popular it has ever been. As someone who's been at this for the past 10 years, I'm telling you, it has never been this popular. In any age demographic, at least now under the age of 35, it is pretty popular. Okay? So, but yet it's still not very popular. Do not let Twitter fool you into thinking that it is. So, that's something to also consider. You do not advocate for positions simply because it's popular and you want the Democratic Party to win. You advocate for positions because you think it's a good thing. You think it's good for Americans. I don't care if Medicare for All polls well. I care that Medicare for All will legitimately help people, will help every American be rid of medical debt. Okay? This is something that a lot of people forget in this space because I think a lot of you became political actors or politically minded at a time when the Democratic Party was, not in power in 2020, leading up to 2020. Okay? When the Democratic Party had no power, so you had the likes of even Kamala Harris saying that they were pro-Medicare for all. But that is a lie. They are not. They are not actually pro-Medicare for all. They could just simply vote on that because they knew that the optics of it would look good. They could get their progressive bona fides. However, they didn't actually ever have to act on it, specifically because Donald Trump was in power. And Democrats were radicalized against, negatively polarized against Trump. Democratic voters, I mean. So make no mistake, this does not necessarily mean that your positions are always going to be popular. You're not advocating for these positions because they're popular. You're advocating for these positions because they're right. Okay? Anyway. As long as the Democrats can sit on their ass and threaten minorities into voting for them, they will never pass progressive policies. Like Angela Davis says, we cannot rely on governments regardless of who is empowered to do the work only mass movements can do. Yes, except the Democratic Party is no longer even defending minorities is the point. And as the calculation on the ground changes, as the Democratic Party makes major gains, as Joe Biden did, with the older white constituencies, because Joe Biden right now is within striking distance of Donald Trump, according to current polling, only because of the suburban moderate whites that are Republican Party voters that think Trump is gross. Not because like the Democratic Party is like legitimately profoundly popular amongst marginalized populations in general. Okay? And that mental calculation, that electoral calculation is showing up in the way that they legislate. Okay? Okay, listen. Chatter's asking about YouTube videos and whatnot. Just contact Little Bear. Why am I talking about this, by the way? Why am I talking about the immigration policy? Because the immigration policy is supposed to be one of the major differences between the Biden administration and the Trump administration. Biden positioned himself as the guy who wasn't going to lock up immigrants for no reason, right? And then he got bullied over and over again. And then he continued building the Trump wall as recently as like in the past couple of months. Like, what good is like, okay, Biden isn't pushing for build the wall as a campaign message, but it doesn't change anything. Ostensibly, he's doing the same. What the Trump deported less than Obama and Biden. You could argue Republicans are better on immigration. No, you can't argue Republicans are better on immigration because Trump deported less than Barack Obama and Biden because under Democratic administrations, look, see, people are already positioning themselves. Look, 10-month subscriber. This election isn't about Biden. It's about defeating MAGA once and for all. And that is a falsehood. Okay? Why is that a falsehood? Why is that a falsehood? Well, let me explain to you why that's a falsehood. Okay? Wait, where the fuck did it go? Oh, here it is. Because if the Biden administration ends up making gains in the margins for certain things while simultaneously taking some of the more important differences, like policy differences that they are supposed to have with the Republican right, and make them permanent, like Title 42, which is insane, then it doesn't matter. One side is more aggressive and messages in a more racist way. The other side says, actually, we're not racist, but we're still going to do the same policies. Here. Allowing illegal immigrants who have jobs in the United States to apply for legal status is a Fox News poll. 62% favor it. Okay? 62%. Now, let me explain something to you. Americans are really f***ed up in the way that they operate as well. Because simultaneously, they will literally, the American voter, the median American voter, has this opinion while also simultaneously thinks like, that like the average immigrant is a rapist and needs to be immediately deported. And you're like, how do you have these two opinions at the same time? That's precisely how you arrive at Republican Party voters that unironically are in favor of amnesty, that also are championing the build the wall narrative. One thing that I always have to mention to you, and this is something that I've been saying for the past 10 years now, okay? Democrats do this thing that is incredibly damaging, where they take a right-wing reactionary false premise that the Republicans move with, like immigrants are rapists, drug dealer, murderers, right? Or this idea that like immigrants are bad, right? Democrats don't counter message against that and say, no, immigrants are good, actually. They sit back and they wait for that message to become the permanent message. And then they poll on immigration issues and they find out that people believe the Republican Party's lies and actually have a more reactionary approach to immigration in the country. So then what did the Democrats do? Well, they go, okay, well, we are also restrictive on immigration. We're just like we're maybe a little bit less restrictive than the Republicans, but we're also restrictive on immigration. When you do that, when you cede ground on right-wing framing on an issue, all you do is make this issue a reality, even if it is built around a false premise, a lie that immigrants are more predisposed towards crime, for example. That's a lie. There's no evidence for this. As a matter of fact, the only evidence, which is limited, shows the exact opposite of that, right? The problem is Republicans don't counter message and show the truth, or Democrats don't counter message and show the truth. Republicans flood the market with falsehoods, and then Americans are like, well, okay, well, if immigrants are rapists, then, you know, we should do something about it, right? Understandably, that's what you're going to see. If that's all you're hearing as an average American, you're going to be like, what the fuck? I don't want rapists in my neighborhood. What the fuck is this shit, right? So then they say they want more restrictive immigration. And then the Democrats say, okay, we'll give you more restrictive immigration. All you've done is cede ground to the Republicans on this issue. And no matter what, Republicans are always going to be able to beat you in that game. You cannot outflank the Republicans on patriotism. You cannot outflank the Republican Party on immigration. You cannot outflank the Republican Party on reactionary attitudes. That's their bread and butter. It is so fucking stupid. No one, and I mean no one, is going to poll and say Democrats are better on immigration if the majority think a false premise that immigrants are a problem in this country is a reality. You're not going to be able to outflank the Republicans on that. So all you've done now is basically turn this conversation away from the reality that immigration is not a problem in this country to basically conceding that it is a problem in this country. You are never going to be able to defeat the Republicans on this. Another thing that happened was crime. Okay? Crime. Democrat-run cities are hotbeds of crime. Every red state has a higher murder rate. Okay? Every red state, in comparison to every blue state, has a higher murder rate, higher rates of gun violence, higher rates for murder. And yet, if you ask Americans, they think, Democrat-run cities are hotbeds of crime. Hotbeds of crime. There's so much crime happening in Democrat-run cities, Democrat-run states. Why did you not counter message around that? Why did you capitulate to the falsehoods? Why did you cede ground to the Republicans? They will always win. The crime is a real issue, and they're killing everyone in these blue cities and blue states. They will always win. They will always win that front. You cannot look at the Republican Party being like, we should be able to say the N-word, and then go, you know what? That's actually true. You should be able to say the N-word. We're going to say it, but we're going to say it with a soft A, and then have people vote for you because they're going to be saying it with a hard R. They're always going to go right. If you allow that to even happen, if you allow this to be like the normal opinion, if you don't counter message against that and go, no, actually, you shouldn't be able to say that. What the fuck are you doing? Republicans are always going to win that battle. Anyway. Terrifying. Actually terrifying. It's really stupid. I remember that video of older Border Patrol officer riding in his Explorer talking about the immigrants saying they're good people, simultaneously corralling them. Exactly. So this isn't just like the Democratic Party. I'm putting my electoralist hat on here. Okay? I'm putting my DNC operative hat on here and saying, Democrats, wake the fuck up. You cannot win elections if you do not show the population that you are different than the Republican Party. If you do not show the population that you are genuinely different, not marginally, but genuinely different than the Republicans, and you do not counter message against the fake that the Republican Party is spouting by way of all matter of communications from Fox News all the way down to the average YouTuber, okay, you're going to lose. You're always going to lose. You're allowing the country to lose. You're allowing the country to become more and more right-wing. Now, of course, if I take the electoralist hat off for a second and look at it with a more macro perspective, look at it from the outside, then, of course, I will say that, of course, it's a bourgeois democracy and both parties are aligned on this agenda, aligned on the agenda of more reactionary policies because ultimately they're operating at the behest of the same corporate benefactors. They are still there to defend capitalism. The Democratic Party is most successful at shutting off any kind of leftist momentum to provide a bottleneck for any kind of real leftist momentum in this country because they too fear material changes.